Good evening, everybody. My name is Lynn Skolnick, and I'm a former member of the board of the Ethelbert B. Crawford Public Library. And joining me tonight is Marvin Rappaport, who's another former member of the Board of Trustees of the Ethelbert B. Crawford Public Library. We are both working on a local history project, and part of that is to interview various community members who either were born or lived or worked or in some way contributed to the community of the Monticello Library region. And our interviewee for tonight, Les Kristt, he covers all of those bases. So I welcome you. It's December 7th, 2023. And welcome, Les. Marvin is there too. Welcome,
Yep.
Les.
Thank you. Thank you, Lynn. Pleasure to be here with you and Marvin. It really is. I look forward to this interview. Was a little nervous for a day or two, but I think I have calmed down.
Okay, good. Les, I have a series of questions to ask you.
Sure.
And the first one I'm going to ask you has to deal with your family. Do you know when your earliest relatives came to Sullivan County or how they got to Sullivan County?
I don't know. Pretty much, yes. All right. I know my grandparents on my father's side came to Sullivan County in 1919. And my father was born in 1917, so obviously he was 2 years old or so at the time. And there was four siblings. My dad was the youngest. I had my oldest aunt was Bertha, and then I had two uncles, Sam and Milt. They moved away from Monticello though when I was quite young. I think Sam and Milt moved before I was born, even perhaps. I was born in, don't tell anybody, but in 1946, and so my family's been in Monticello since 1919. An interesting thing, somewhere, if I look hard enough, I have the deed to the original house that my grandfather bought that year in 1919. It was on Landfield, not Landfield, but Liberty Street in Monticello, Liberty Street and Cottage Street.
Oh, and what was your dad's name, Les?
My dad's name was Nathan, but fondly most people called him Nutch. And it's an interesting story behind that. There was a lady that nicknamed my father and Tarbo Lashinsky. They were both in the same class growing up, and that same person named my dad Nutch and Tarbo. That was interesting.
Okay. And what your dad and his family, how did they earn a living in Sullivan County at that time?
Okay. My joke is that my grandfather was a CPA. He pressing and alterations, and he was a tailor. And I know he worked for Don Hammond for a long while. All right. I became friends with Don when I was an adult, and we became pretty good friends. And he would tell me about my grandfather as a tailor for him. And he was also pretty well connected with the synagogue, which was the Liberty Street Synagogue was very, very close to his house. So he was connected to that. My grandmother in the old days, like most ladies, she was a stay-at-home mom and so forth. They also rented out rooms in their house. They didn't have a giant house, but they had a house with probably 3 or 4 rooms around the house that they would rent out in the summertime. So that's kind of how they made their living.
And do you remember any of those guests that lived there? Did they come back every summer or?
I don't. I was very my grandfather passed away in 1951 when I was 5, and my grandmother passed away in 54 when I was a bit older. And I really don't personally remember the guests, but I do have old pictures of quite a few old pictures of guests and my grandparents and so forth at that house. And so but it's quite a while ago.
And talk about your early days growing up in Monticello. What was it like?
Okay, it was very, very much different than it is today. All the stores down Broadway, they were all not only open, but they were very, very busy, especially during the summertime. I at a very young age, we were able to walk to Broadway. I only lived 2 blocks off of Broadway growing up on Garden Drive, which is still in existence. It's 2 blocks off of Monticello. So I'd walk there. We'd go to the movie theaters, and I remember actually walking there, and at times we would look at the license plates as the cars passed down there, see what states the cars were from, and then when I got old enough, we kind of had a game where we'd count the number of Fords that drove by, the number of Chevys that drove by. So it was fun. Jeffrey Gersten used to do that with me, Marvin. I remember walking to town with
Yep,
him and looking at all the cars driving by.
right.
So that was
And do you
interesting.
remember some of those early the stores that you went to, the movie theaters, ice cream?
I have a couple uh fun stories that I remember. One thing in the fall time I remember so clearly is there was two properties that had beautiful chestnut trees on them when I was growing up. And a few of us would go to those chestnut trees in the fall time and throw sticks up into the trees to get the chestnuts to fall down. And we'd open up the chestnuts and we collect them in a big bag. Who knows what we did with them after that? They were not edible type of chestnuts, but it was fun collecting them. Then when I was a little bit older, at 14, my mother every morning at 6 o'clock would take me to the Laurel's Country Club golf course in the summer to be a caddy. I remember that I didn't love that particular job. First of all, it was approximately 6 in the morning when she did that. But when we got there, there was dew everywhere. I mean, it was just really wet. And the golf pro had us all collecting the balls that had gotten lost in the trees and so forth. And man, we got wet. Our whole pants were wet. And then we had to sit there and wait for the golfers to come. It was actually a small golf course. It wasn't one of the more famous golf courses, but those are some of my
But at
memories of the
least
golf course.
the golf balls you collected had more use than those chestnuts that you collected.
Yes, they absolutely did. The golf pro took them and redistributed them. That
Do you
was
remember what you got paid?
oh goodness, we didn't get paid directly for being a caddy. We simply got paid by the tips that the golfers would give us as we went. And I was a very little guy at that time. I grew up and I became way stronger in my late teens and 20s. But in those years I was very small, and when they put two of those bags on my shoulders, I looked like I was buried in bags and so forth. And I'm sorry, and maybe we made $2 or $4 for carrying those golf clubs around. But I did learn the theory of golf doing that. You know, you got to give a 7-iron when you're X amount of yards away from the tee, and so forth and so on. So it
No,
was in a
no
way an
one asked you to
interesting
go on
job.
tour with them.
What's that?
No one asked you to go on tour with
No,
them.
no one. I don't think they were quite good enough to be on the tour. Golfing at the Laurel's Country Club. So that's when I was 14. When I was 15, I got a job that really kind of changed my life. All right. I got a job at Playland Arcade, and Playland Arcade was in a building that has burnt down since then, but the building was right next to where the library is now. And Playland was there for many, many years. And the gentleman who owned Playland Arcade, his name was Phil Walter. And Phil truly changed my life. He taught me so much about responsibility, about uh, business, and so forth. One of my jobs was to wash down the skee ball machines. All right. And another job was to mop the floors. And I became so good at that he made me the manager the following summer. All right. But he also taught me about merchandising. We used to have to put out the merchandise where people would win for one coupon, 10 coupons. He had up to 1,000, 2,000 coupons, and how to put them out and keep them properly so it'd be interesting for the clients to look at those. And then in the evenings when I worked there, of course, the people would be playing skee ball and all these other different types of games, and we'd be handing out coupons to them. So that was a fun job. I did that for about 3 years or so.
So were your friends from school coming in while you were working?
Were my friends coming in to play well,
Yeah.
the in those years, the arcade was primarily open in the summertime. So
Ah,
certainly my friends would come in, but also many summer people who I of course met. And in those years, Monticello again was quite different. We on a Saturday night, we'd have to close up at about 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning because families were walking down the street coming into the arcade time and time again on a Saturday night, and then a bit earlier on Friday nights and the other nights. And so, but it was a very interesting job, and it really taught me a lot about business. Phil was so confident in me, and he couldn't stand doing the payroll himself, so he gave me the payroll. It was about, who knows, 15 or 20 kids and one or two adults that worked there. And every week I would work on the payroll and do it, and then he signed the checks and give them out to people. So I learned a lot from him, a lot.
very good. And um, Les, where did you go to school? What school buildings were in
Oh,
existence then?
sure. Okay. I'm sure Marvin will remember a lot of these school buildings. For kindergarten, first and second grade, I was in the telephone building. All right.
Ah,
And we'd walk around the side and up the staircase. And one interesting story about my uh, first grade teacher was Mrs. Bell. All right. And Harvey Lashinsky was in my class with Mrs. Bell. And the coincidence is that both our fathers went to school together and went through the same grades. And our fathers both had Mrs. Bell for kindergarten, I don't know, 30 years previous to us having them. So, and I also had Mrs. Winterberger for second grade, and she became the historian for the town of Forestburg. Marvin, you live in her house, don't you? Or
I
her
do
former?
indeed.
Yeah,
Yes, that's
yeah,
correct.
yeah. So she was my second grade teacher. And then we moved to where the middle school building, of course, and the side that's on was it
Bedford Avenue?
Bedford Avenue. Yes, the side that's on Bedford Avenue. I went to third grade. I had Mrs. Drutt, and then I
Millie
had
Drutt.
third, fourth Miss Eustner, and fifth grade and sixth grade. And sixth grade was Mrs. O'Neill, and that's when we all went to the same class. And then when we went to high school, we went to the other building. That was when what grown-up kids did in those years. Went from the grade school building over to the high school building. And then I went for all 4 years in that high school.
So
And
you finished high school before the new building
yes,
opened in
yes.
67.
Marvin, was you the first class that was in? No, you were never in
No,
the new building.
no. We graduated in 65 and
Okay,
it wasn't built yet. But when I came back to teach in 69, the new building was there.
right. So in those ensuing years, I graduated in 64. Marvin 65. They built the new building in a couple of years after that, and then they started to go to high school there.
Well, now Uncle Vic would not allow me to let this pass without me reminding you about our time on the Rotary in the Little League. We won the
Yes.
championship.
We were the championships, and Uncle
Yeah,
Vic was very instrumental in my life. He of course had Camp Hamilton and Hamilton Road, and I
at
went
Vic
to Camp
Gordon. Yep.
Vic
Vic Gordon,
Gordon.
right? Uncle Vic Gordon, and I went to camp there for 5 years, and then of course, as Marvin said, it was a day camp back in those years. Marvin said Vic was our coach. Then Vic took over the ski hill. When the ski hill was formulated, he ran the ski hill for many years, and Vic was instrumental in the entire world actually in developing snowmaking, which they did at Holiday Mountain. And I worked for him during the winter times at Holiday Mountain for about 3 or 4 years around the time I graduated college and first came home. And then Vic was the one that invited me into Rotary in 1975. And the two things in my life that have been most instrumental is one, Rotary. I've been in Rotary now for just about 49 years. And the other, of course, is my business that I've been involved with now for 53 or so years.
Oh,
Let's
okay.
Lynn, let's back up a little bit and have
Sure.
Les tell us about his father. Is it your father that started the business on Upper Broadway?
Yes,
Okay.
my father, I believe, started the business in the late 30s with my grandfather, with his father. And they opened the business where the doctor's office was across from the mobile station in Monticello. It was just old, dilapidated, originally houses and then small storefronts. And I was his business was in a storefront with maybe 1,000, 1,200 square feet at that time. Everything was piled on top of each other. Used to deal with
What I remember, Les, was it was very narrow. I mean, Clover
yes,
Exterminating, I think, was on one side. I don't remember what was on the other. But when you came into Krist's stationery store for an adding machine or paper or whatever, it was really narrow, and everything was on one side, as I remember, and you had to
you're
go all
so
the way in
right.
straight to the back.
You're so right. That's exactly the way it was laid out. And when I got finished with Cornell in 1969, in approximately March of 69, I left Cornell. And my father really needed me in the business. He was not feeling 100%. It was just my mother, my father, and one other person working there. So I came back in 69 and I went into the business with him. And it was still in that old dilapidated building. And we just had 4 people working there that first winter. And then the summer of 69 was, of course, Woodstock. And urban renewal came through at that time. And they gave us a few $1,000s to move out of that building so they could tear it down and put up that doctor's office. And we moved over to Jefferson Street, where what's the name? Albella's
Albella.
is right now. But we didn't have that entire building. We only had about 17 or 1,800 square feet in that building. And that was from 69 to 75. We were in there.
Les, you've mentioned a couple of people, Vic Gordon certainly being one, Phil Walter, another one,
Yes.
who influenced you in rereading your speech you gave when you were inducted into the Monticello Central School District Wall of Fame.
Yes.
You tell of another person who influenced your life, who got you interested in math. You want to share that story?
Oh, okay. That was Mr. Goldstein. Okay. When all through high school or grade school, I was quite innocuous. All right, as I put in that speech, I was basically a piece of furniture, and I was looking for my way of greatness. All right, and I was in math class in ninth grade, and I was not in an advanced math class, but the teacher who was teaching that class noticed that I seemed to be quite talented in mathematics. So he went to Mr. Goldstein, who was teaching them the algebra and the
Geometry.
elementary and algebra and so forth. He said, Les is pretty good. Why don't you take him into these classes and see how he does? So I immediately skipped elementary algebra, went into Mr. Goldstein's intermediate algebra. I aced it, just completely aced the algebra course, aced geometry the next year, did great on calculus and so forth. And that's basically how I got into Cornell University. I was also quite good in science. Mr. Weinstein, who is still kicking, I think at 96 years old, still active.
97.
He was our biology teacher, Mr. Bremenstuhl and V. Burton Bremenstuhl, and then we quote unquote friendly call him VB squared. And he was our chemistry teacher and our physics teacher, and I did quite well in those classes as well.
It's always interesting to hear people talk about the people who influenced them and how that kind of drove a path for you. And always nice to hear.
may I talk about one other person who
Sure.
just came to mind, who was quite influential in my life in different ways, and that's David Kaufman, who, I mean, David is somebody that pretty much everybody loved. And the first time I remember meeting David, his nephew, Stuart Kaufman, who was in Marvin's class and unfortunately passed away in a car accident at a very early age. But Stuart and I would walk to Hebrew school together, the Lamfield Avenue Synagogue, and Stuart's father, Irving, and David owned a small grocery store right on Broadway, pretty much on the way to Hebrew school. So Stuart and I would go in there before Hebrew school, and we would stock the shelves. We'd bring I remember the soup cans we brought upstairs and restocked the soup, and everything was downstairs in this old basement there. I could probably still walk through that basement and tell you where things are. But the distinctive thing that David did, he paid me at the end of the day, and then he would look at me and said, Les, here's an additional 50 cents. You really did well. And that was my first meeting of David. And we just became friends after that. Then when David got into politics, of course, he was the mayor of Monticello, and then he was with the town of Thompson, the supervisor, and we remained friends right up until his demise, till he passed away a few years ago. And what a wonderful person! And again, he influenced me dramatically on how to act, how to deal with business and so forth, and with people. Wonderful man.
So after you came back from Cornell, did you say 69 or was it after that?
Yes. I came back in March of 69.
So after you came back and you went into the business with your dad, you were still up on Broadway, or had you moved over to
We were
Jefferson?
still on Broadway. And then in the fall time, in September, before the snow fell, well, we moved over to that place on Jefferson Street. Then I'm going to say approximately 1972, 73, we bought the piece of property that the current Kristt Kelly building is sitting on. And there was an old house on there. And we did something that they would never allow us to do after we finished paying for it. It took us 3 years to pay off that piece of property. We bought it from Chick Press at the time. It was the Davidson family, actually, along with Chick, that owned it. And again, there was an old house there. And when we went to build the new building, what we did is we buried the house in the back of the property. They would never, ever let us do that nowadays. You have to take it out of there and so on and so forth. But in those years they did. They said, no problem. Buried it all the way in the back of the property. And then a gentleman that you probably familiar with the name, Pip Berman, built our building for us. Pip had built a lot of the Concord. He built the Raleigh Hotel, and we were lucky enough to get him to build the first part of our building there. And we moved in, and my father was still alive at the time, in October 21st of 1975. And then my dad, unfortunately, of course, passed away in January of 1977. And only about a year and a half after we built that building. When we first moved into the building, it was myself, my father, and maybe 6 or 7 other people that worked there. My dad passed away, and there was 2 offices towards the front of that building. I had one and he had the other. So a few days after he passed away, I went from my office and I sat down in his chair in his office, and I did not move a pencil. All right. Until I was sure I knew what he used to do properly, I didn't move a pencil. Every single thing was exactly in place. I did things as best I could to imitate how he did things until I got a feel for how to run the business. And then I sort of let my own imagination and creativity go from there and change things one at a time. And that's maybe 2 years after my dad passed away, the business fortuitously started to grow in a very pleasant fashion. And I'm sorry, go ahead, Lynn.
Les, what was your primary focus of the business at that time? Were you servicing hotels? Were you servicing in the area, outside of the area?
Okay, thank you. Good question. Good question. Uh, a lot with the hotels, and in those years, we're talking when we first moved there was 1975, not or so, 1976. Most of the larger hotels were still open. I remember the Concord Hotel was clearly our biggest client, and their check was so important to us. I remember my dad would call up the bookkeeper there and say, "Gee, do you have that check ready? I'm going to send Les over there to pick it up." And I'd go over to the Concord Hotel to the bookkeeping office, and the check was somewhere $2,000, $2,200. It seemed like $1,000,000 to me at that time. I'd bring it back, and oh man, we'd rejoice and keep going. But I remember Mrs. Schweid at the Pines Hotel. Kutcher's, I was very friendly with Milton Hill and Kutcher. Many men, the Brickman Hotel, the Windsor Hotel, Grossinger's, of course. We did business with all those hotels. Then, as they started closing, I had to refocus my business. Of course, one interesting person that used to come into the store from the hotels, from the Shady Nook Country Club, a lady by the name of Mrs. Comito. And
Oh,
she was such an interesting lady. She was quite different, all right. And it wasn't one of your big giant hotels, but I got to know her in a pleasant fashion. Her daughter was interesting too. Mrs. Comito gave me a book that her daughter wrote, I think on sex education or something.
was she involved at the Aladdin at all?
You know, I apologize. That was the Aladdin. And I kept saying the Shady Nook's the Aladdin. Yes, ma'am. You are
Carrie,
absolutely correct.
Carrie
And
Comito.
the only way I knew that is my first summer at the Raleigh Hotel, which was not my first summer in the mountains.
Right.
Barry, who was not my husband at the time, he left the Raleigh that summer. He had been working at the Raleigh, and he was the maitre d' at the Aladdin
Okay, it's the
for Mrs.
Aladdin, and I
Comito.
apologize. I mixed up.
All
How
right.
can you mix up the Aladdin and the Shady Nook? But I did somehow. So yes,
See, we all have a history, even though I'm an outsider, only
you're
been
not
here
an
50 some
outsider.
years. I still have a history here and know a few things.
Yes,
So you
you
can't
do.
get anything over on
Absolutely.
me.
So
Let us not go too far without mentioning your mom. Tell us her name and what she might have done, because I think I worked with her.
Oh, that's
At
you
Kaplan's.
probably did. You probably did. My mom is Frances. Okay, my mom is from Syracuse. So in 1946, my dad's uh, brother Sam lived in Syracuse, and my mother's entire family lived in Syracuse. She had relative after relative in Syracuse. So in 1946, somebody from Syracuse, one of Sam's friends, introduced my mom to my father. And that was right after my dad got out of the service, and they got married very quickly. They got married in February of 1946. And then when I was born in December, I was December 20th of 46. My mom was only comfortable going to Syracuse and having the baby, me, there in Syracuse with all her family around her. And I was there in Syracuse for about 2 months. And then, of course, she came back to Monticello and quote unquote lived happily ever after. But my mom had two interesting jobs that I clearly remember, besides working with my dad and being his bookkeeper during those years before I got there. But my mom worked at Marvin. Maybe you can help me. The name of the cowboy town in
Cimarron
Cimarron
City.
City.
Cimarron City. Yes, my mom worked as a cashier at Cimarron City there when they were open for a number of years there, and that was an interesting job that they had. I would go there all the time, see my mom, go inside, see them have their fun shootouts at Cimarron City, so on, robberies, so on and so forth. That's one place you work. But Marvin, you must have worked with her once you worked with Ann, your aunt at Kaplan's. My mom was the cashier at Kaplan's for many, many years as well during the summertime. And that's where I got my love for corned beef and pastrami sandwiches, for knishes. I had a knish tonight, as a matter of fact. Reminded me a little bit of Kaplan's.
I didn't work with your dad, but I remember him being a very nice fellow, gregarious, hail fellow, well met. But your mom always had a smile. She worked behind the counter, the
Yes.
cash register, and it was always crazy there. But she kept her
Always wild
cool.
there.
She smiled, took the money, shepherded people in, said hello, and was really the face of Kaplan's for a while when Ann wasn't there. So
Right.
she did a great job.
I used to enjoy going in there to see her. Ann would be there quite often, and all the counter people would be there, and I got to know everybody at the counter, and it was just a fun place to go into. And of course, all the banners, the college banners, were all over the walls up there. Ann, I think, created that concept that numerous people imitated over the years, but Ann was the original, I think.
Right, she gave a salami, a midget salami, to
Yes,
everyone who brought in a
yes.
banner that she didn't have.
Oh,
Yes,
interesting. I
yes.
may probably be one of the few college students who, when her mother sent her care packages, I never got brownies or cookies. Always got a Hebrew National salami.
Did great.
Les, so in 75 or 77, after your dad passed away, and then in the ensuing years, the hotels started closing more and more.
Right.
So you had to reimagine your business as well.
Okay. Fortuitously, technology changed as well. Okay. So that helped me out a whole lot. And I'll explain what I mean by that. When in the early years of me being in the business, we would sell and service manual typewriters, and then we'd sell and service the IBM Model Cs, the Model Ds, the Selectrics eventually. And we sold mimeograph machines and rented mimeograph machines to the camp. But it was a very limited audience for a mimeograph machine. I mean, you wouldn't go into an attorney's office and see a mimeograph machine. Okay, so then that's when technology started to change from typewriters and electric and manual. They started to change to word processors, then of course computers, then of course Microsoft Word. Then the mimeograph machines all morphed into copiers, and the copiers started out very simple. I picked up the line of Kyocera copiers somewhere around 1981 or 82. In those years, they didn't even enlarge it and reduce. The first copiers that I sold was a 20-minute machine, giant Kyocera box that just produced 20 copies a minute, didn't do both sides of the sheet, and it didn't reduce or enlarge. Then a machine came out that reduced. It would reduce from legal size to letter size. And now, of course, you got the copiers that are really multi-function machines. They duplex, do on both sides. They fold and staple. They you can print from your onto your copier. You can scan into your computer, and you can even fax from these copiers. So whereas we lost the customers such as the hotels because they went out of business, but now we can sell a copier to every single attorney who's out there, all the different offices. The county government center needs one in every single office. We have some great clients. The Monticello School just started last year buying all their copiers from us. We have one, must have 25 machines there. So that's how technology changed and really helped me to expand my business. And the other
Les,
thing,
you also, let me interject. I was in Honesdale not long ago, and I saw there was a Kristt in Honesdale. And I realized that you have grown at one point, and were you all over the state? I mean, you were way beyond Sullivan County, no?
well, I never grew beyond Wayne and Pike counties in Orange County, and of course Orange and Sullivan and Ulster County, and a few other places slightly north or west of Delaware County and so forth. The place in Honesdale. Let me back up if you don't mind, just a little
Sure.
bit, okay? I talked about how technology changed and helped me. I have to talk about my partner just for a short while, Gene Kelly. All right. he dramatically changed my business as well. And let me tell you Gene's story, if you will. Gene came to me for the first time when he was 19 years old, and he lived in Narrowsburg and had been working for his dad on the river. And he came in and he said, Les, I'd like to work for you and drive a truck, please. And the first time he came in, I said, okay, let me think about it. He came in a second time. Then he called me once or twice, and I said to myself, this guy really wants to work. I'm going to hire him. So I hired him. He was a truck driver. He delivers his stuff for me. And then one day, relatively short while later, Gene comes to me and he says, Les, I'd like to learn how to fix the copiers. I said, okay, let's give that a try. I sent him away to the schools, the technical schools, to fix the copiers, and he'd come back. He was very good at fixing copiers, but he'd go to Middletown to an attorney's office, and he'd sell him a new copier for $6,000 or $7,000. After about the third or fourth time that he did that, I said, I'm not going to keep him as a tech. I'm going to make him into a salesperson. So I did. I made Gene the head of the quote unquote new sales department at Kristt Kelly, and he took off. He really knew how to sell these copiers. And then after a while, I came to the conclusion he's so good at business. I made him the general manager. And then he comes to me, Les, I want to learn the furniture also. So he learned all about the furniture, how to sell it, what it's about, and he started selling the furniture in the same fashion that he sold the copiers. So we worked like that for a few years. Then he came to me, he says, Les, I want to work my way into being a partner with you. And I sat down and I worked out a program that, believe it or not, I think was 15 or 20 years. And he started out, the first half of it was to earn to 25% of the business, and he earned his way into that. Then after that was finished, we figured out how to do another 25%, and he finished that. And now we're full partners, 50-50, and he's fabulous. We never argue. We always work together in a positive fashion. Today, I mean, we're still working together to make money at Kristt Kelly.
Is this
So
the only job he's ever had?
he worked for his dad for a while. His dad had a
Oh, you
boat
mentioned that,
rental
yeah.
place all right. But basically this is the only, real job that he's had
Yeah.
his whole
Yeah, I mean,
life.
it's just a great story of how he had some aggressive personality, but you
I
recognized in
I
him.
like to say a good salesman has a pleasantly aggressive personality. Aggressive, not totally aggressive. They have to have
Yes.
interaction with the person they're selling, and that's his game all the time. He talks to people and he communicates properly, but he's very, very good salesperson, whatever he may be selling.
Les, how many people do you employ now?
I thought you were going to ask me how many people work for me. My stock answer for that is about half of them. Not really.
Said by a guy who truly grew up in the Borscht Belt.
Actually, the people that work for me now are really pretty good. They're all working hard, I assure you. But right now I have approximately 20 people that work with us all together. At one time, there was somewhere in the neighborhood in the summer we had as many as 45 people working. The economy in Sullivan County shrank a bit, and one company that went out of business hurt a lot for a while, and that was Frontier Insurance. The Ruin family has always been just wonderful to me. I cannot tell you how great Walter was. He bought everything from me, and his company, Frontier Insurance, at its height, had satellite offices all over the country. Somebody there at Frontier would call me up, Les, we need a copier in Los Angeles, California. So we'd contact a dealer in Los Angeles, have the copier delivered by him, and we'd get a very handsome commission. Then we'd sell items all the way, we'd ship them all the way to Los Angeles to for these copiers and so forth. So Frontier was fabulous. Obviously, very unfortunate for us and many people in the community. They had a fold not too many years ago. So I lost my biggest and best customer ever, but we've slowly been making up for that.
Good.
Great.
And when did you take on the art shop?
Okay, the art shop. Let's get back to, we were talking about the building at one time, and then I sidetracked you a bit, and then getting back to the building. Okay, the first part of the building was 7,500 square feet and was built on that original piece of property that we bought from the Davidson family. But the art shop building was a separate house at that time, and I did not own that property. There was a sliver of property between the house and the original Kristt Company building that I bought first. Okay, so I bought that sliver, and then I forget exactly how much later I went to Fred Davidson and Chick from Chick Press, and I bought the house and about 400 feet from Broadway. So the house stood alone there, and originally it had tenants. It was broken into about 5 different small apartments, and after about 2 or 3 months of begging the tenants to pay their rent, and then then having to fix the toilets and everything else that went wrong in that darn house. I said to myself, it's just I'm a middleman here. I'm really not making any money renting these apartments out. I'm going to simply politely ask these folks to leave, which I did. I gave them time, they left, and then I sat and I tried to figure out what is the best use of this building for me. So I came to the conclusion that art supplies were uh, really an interesting adjunct to what I sell already. I sell a lot of things. I sold engineering supplies and so forth, and of course, a lot of office supplies. So art supplies seemed to be the next step. So I started selling art supplies in the main part of the building. Then, short while later, I had somebody who said they would run the art shop, and I moved all the art supplies to the house that was next door. It wasn't connected yet, uh, and I'm blocking the name of the nice lady who ran the art shop for me. Goodness, I saw her husband today too. Uh, anyway, she.
Was that
Oh
Magnetico?
no, not Magnetico.
Before Jessica?
Yes. Oh, yeah. Before Jessica Magnetico, she was just great. She was wonderful. A funny story with that too. The art shop was not connected to the Kristt Company building, so she hired a couple. She would hire a couple people to work for her over there, make it a bit easier to do what she has to do. She hired this one lady who had a girlfriend that was really close to her, and the girlfriend comes into the art shop building, and they're in there, and I come out from the main building, and I look up to the roof, and this woman's girlfriend is standing on the roof, and I shout up out, "What are you doing on the roof?" And she says, "Well, so and so asked me to clean the leaves out from the gutters." And I looked at her, I said, "You're not going to do that. The roof there is so steep. You're going to fall. You owe my whole business to everything. You can't do that. Please get off of there." So she got off of the roof, and that was it. So the art shop building was there for a couple of years before I did anything. We kept expanding the art supplies and so forth. Then we took on framing, and the framing became very profitable, and it was and we started to use the upstairs in the building for the framing, and I needed more room in the regular building. So in about 1981, I built my first addition to the original Kristt
Connected.
Company building, and it went over to the right. Then I built my second addition, which connected to the back of that house. And then again, that's something they wouldn't let me do today. That house is vintage, approximately 1870, I believe.
Wow.
Okay. And so they wouldn't let me do that, but they did in those years.
So Les, I know you have some children and some grandchildren.
Yes, I do.
Tell us about them.
Okay, well, they this aspect of my life, I was successful in getting children and grandchildren, not so successful at times with my marriages, but I had two marriages of 15 years each. So my first marriage was with Nan, and we had two wonderful, wonderful children, Dara and Eric. And Dara is now an attorney in Albany, and Dara has two young boys, one Calvin, he's 7, and the other Gabriel, he's about 4. And Dara's quite successful there with her attorney work. Then my son Eric lives in Miami, who I'm going to visit in January, and he has his own business down there. So that's the first half of my marriage. Then I got married to Amy, and I was married to her for 15 years. We did not have any children together, but Amy's 2 children, and Katie was here tonight and is coming back. They both consider me dad. Okay, it's Cody lives near Chester now, and she's married to a wonderful, wonderful man, and she has 2 little girls. One is I think 4, and the other is almost 2. And Katie's got a boyfriend. She's not quite married. She's only 26, but she calls me dad, and then very lovingly so as well. So
So you have
that's my
a whole
family.
bunch of people calling you grandpa.
Yes, yes. I got four people calling me grandpa, which is always fun.
Yeah.
Always fun.
Can I ask a question, Lynn?
Sure.
Yeah.
Les, you are among the most community-minded people that I know. And having grown up with you and seen your successes in business, it was never enough for you. You've been giving back to the community through Rotary and other organizations. Tell us about how you approach giving back to the community, and where did that come from, if you could?
I think a lot of it comes from my parents. Okay, my dad was by all means not a rich person at all. I mean, he had a nice house when we were growing up, not a big house. We didn't have a garage or anything. He didn't have fancy cars, but he taught me how to love people and how to embrace people, as my mom did. We went over my mom and how she would entertain the people at Kaplan's when they came in and so forth. And my dad would always embrace people. They always made sort of a fun joke about how they would always know where my father was in the movie theater because he would have such a hearty laugh that everybody said, "That's Nutch over there. He's up front laughing at the movie." So my mom and my dad kind of taught me how to embrace people, and I for this sticks in my mind for some reason. Many years ago, somebody told me to be successful, you have to be either the meanest SOB that ever walked or the nicest man on earth. So I think you know which route I took. I try to be as nice as I can be and embrace people. And when I talk to people and work with people, I try my best to make them feel really good and really comfortable about themselves and about myself. And I guess that's what any good salesman does. But we talked a little bit before about my company maintaining itself within 5 or 6 county area, which we have. Unfortunately or unfortunately, in Sullivan County, it's very difficult to reach out, at least for me, to have reached out too much farther than that. So who knows, 30, 40 years ago, I said to myself, I'm going to be involved in some other things besides just my business. And the Rotary, which is the other thing in my life that has given direction, was certainly a vehicle to do that. The first project that I took part in Rotary was right when I first got into Rotary, which was 1975, January of 75. They were building the government center, and that opened in 76. And we used to have an art show from the Rotary. Now we have the Monster Run, but in those years we had the art show as our primary event for the year. and we used to have it in the Monticello gym, which is the old Monticello High School. In the gym there, I came up with the idea in '76. Hey, let's have the art show in the new government center and show off the government center. And that's what happened.
Les, my husband and I bought our very first piece of art at the Rotary Art Show in the middle 70s. It's still on my wall.
Marvin, do you know who helped me dramatically with that art show? Do you know Cheryl Morantz?
Yeah, of course, Denise.
Okay, of course, obviously, that's your mother-in-law. But Cheryl and I, we were friends. You know, we've always been friends. But she was beginning selling her artwork, and she came to me with numerous pieces of art that we put in that art show, and really filled up the government center, along with all the local artists and so forth that put artwork in the government center. And we got a project who Jay Burley helped me with. There was, I think, 10 school districts at that time in Sullivan County. It was 1976, which was the bicentennial year for the United States, of course, and we had each of them do a mural that we put all around the government center, the inside, that big open area inside, and we had a contest to see who was going to win the best mural of all the school, and they all put it in there. And a few years ago, I was in the Tri-Valley School, and they still have that mural hanging up on one of their walls there. So that's how I got started, kind of, with the Rotary. And at that time, the Rotary Club was quite popular in the community. We had 75 or 80 members of the Rotary in those years. And after that first project, they all really embraced me, and they gave me the fast line to become president of the club. So I was in whatever year, 78 or so, they made me the second vice president, and then I was the first vice president, and then in July of '79, I was elected or chosen or threatened to become president of the Monticello Rotary Club, which I did. And that was the first time I was able to actually speak in public. And the first meeting I got up to speak and to control, I was as nervous as could be. My knees were knocking, but I was able to accomplish that night, and ever since have been able to get up and to speak publicly in a somewhat calm and good fashion.
You do a great job. Weren't you also involved with the Bagel Fest recently?
Well, the Bagel Fest, I'm involved in that I'm on the board of directors of the Chamber of Commerce. All right, my big projects over the years that I've kind of taken on Rotary. I've been in Rotary and doing their projects every single year for the last 10 years or so. I've been the chairperson of the Monster Run. All right. And the Monster Run, the last 3 years have taken place at Resorts World Catskills. This year, we earned somewhere in the neighborhood of $20,000 between the sponsors and the entrants. And Resorts World loves us up there. It's a great event for them. And we gave approximately $12,000 of that money directly to the Sullivan County Veterans Coalition. Howie Goldsmith works with me all the time on that project, and we've been on the radio many times advertising it. And then we took $8,000 for the Monticello Rotary to be able to give out to a variety of other charities. So that's one thing I work on. Then the Heartathon is exactly what I was going to mention next, sir. And the Heartathon, I started becoming the chairperson of the Heartathon about 14 or 15 years ago. And I've been the chairperson ever since. I'm the chairperson again this year. We're going to have the Heartathon on February 16th. It's a Friday, again at the Resorts World. They've been very kind to the community hosting the Heartathon. And last year we had $105,000 worth of pledges, of which we give a lot to the hospital. We have some great people that work on that committee with me for the Heartathon. You see the hearts that are spread out all over Sullivan County now, and we Al Frangipani is the heart man, and he helps, and Jack Costello and Gary Siegel and all those people. We have a fabulous committee, and the Heartathon has been quite successful.
A footnote, Dave Kaufman, whom you mentioned, who also
Yes,
was a friend of my family for many years.
sure.
When I started working in Monticello and then went to Washington and then to New York, Dave called me every single year, wherever I was, and said, "What are you giving to the Heartathon? I got to put you down." And I would, of course, do it in memory of my dad, who passed away early. And it was a nice opportunity just to remember family members over the years and to contribute to a good cause. So,
And the
kudos to
person
Dave.
who's taken that
This-
on now is Gary Siegel. He can make you feel like you're giving because you want to, you know.
Oh,
and you
absolutely.
do.
Gary's a professional at that.
He-
Listen, Marvin, I'm with that in mind, I'm going to call you this year and ask for that $5,000 donation again. Okay.
Okay.
Well,
You can
I know
ask.
that I
Yeah,
see every day on social media, Les, you are involved in every aspect of our community. And it's really a wonderful thing.
Well,
And we surely appreciate that.
Well, you're welcome.
I have just a couple more questions. You know what I
Sure.
forgot to ask you, and
What's
I always
that?
ask everybody is, when you were a kid, did you go to the Monticello Library?
Oh, that's right. The Monticello, yes, of course I did. You had to go to the Monticello Library. It was a very interesting place in those years. Okay, I remember I had my library card, and you walked in downstairs, and the librarian was down there. It was just in that relatively small building, of course,
Yeah.
but then there was a school library also that I went to, and Miss Beam was.
Oh, yes.
Yep.
Marvin, you remember Miss Beam?
Was it
Indeed, I
true
do.
that she X'd out pictures in the National Geographics? That's the story I heard when I first came and started teaching. Miss Beam X'd out the certain
I wouldn't
pictures.
doubt that. Miss Beam, we used to go to the lunch in the cafeteria in the old high school there. Every day Miss Beam would come in. She had a doily that she takes out of her pocketbook, puts the doily on the seat. She couldn't sit on that seat without a doily on there, so she didn't get her skirt or dress all messed up by whatever might have been on that seat. But that was Miss Beam. But she was a wonderful, wonderful lady, really was.
Les, another question I want to ask is, everyone seems to compare then and now in
Right.
Monticello, Sullivan County. What is your take on then and now? Especially because you've managed to be so involved in your community, probably even more so now than you were in the early 70s when you first came back here.
Great question. Of course, everything focused around the hotels in those years. I used to go to a lot of hotel shows. Milton and Helen were very good friends of mine. They were at my bar mitzvah even, so I felt very comfortable going over to the hotels and going swimming there or going to the bars. Helen would always embrace me, give me a big hug. Hello, Les, how are you? So that's how your social life kind of revolved around in those years. In my younger years, there were a lot of bars to go to in Monticello that we just had fun. But life changes. Life changes. In today's world, it's so much easier to communicate person to person. You have your iPhones and your Facebook, so you know where your best friend is in 3 seconds. You're able to go there. You know what's happening up in Parksville. You know what's happening out in Narrowsburg and Calhoun. You know what's happening in Wurtsboro. And there's so many fabulous towns that there's great things happening. Like I'm going to be in Rock Hill at the Brew tomorrow night. Going to see BJ Henderson. He's going to be playing music there. How did I know that? Well, BJ's a friend of mine on Facebook, and he puts that out. I'm going to be in Calhoun on Saturday. I'm going to be at the synagogue at Landfield Avenue on Sunday evening because Lori James told me about it on Facebook. So, and there's so many great people here. I absolutely love my friends, and there's so many of them here in Sullivan County. To me, it's just it is home, period. It's just wonderful. I have so many things to do. Last night I was at the Visitors Association, their dinner. Last Saturday night I was at the Murph's Toy Drive. Now I've become good friends with Josh Murphy from the Jeffersonville area, and I helped him arrange this Murph's Toy Drive. We had 300 people there, and again, I think we reached maybe 3,000 toys that we collected for all the kids in Sullivan County. They were distributed by Julian and United Way, and I've just become friends with we'll say Julian United Way, Kathy Kreider of the
Federation
Federation for the Homeless, so forth and so on. So I know the people to contact to talk about. We have a food drive, how to distribute it. We have a coat drive, how to distribute it to toys and so forth. So it's relatively easy for me to pick up a phone and say, gee, this is what we're doing this week. Why don't you please give me a hand and help me do this, that, and the other thing?
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you one other question. Les, is there something you wish I had asked you that I did not ask you? Something that you want to share?
Woo, that's a good one. We didn't talk about the future, so
Okay.
all right. Hopefully, I still have a good future. I'm going to hit the double sevens. In December 20th, I'll be 77. But as you can hopefully attest to, I'm still quite active. I had some tough times almost exactly 5 years ago. I beat cancer. All right, I beat cancer, and I feel quite well nowadays. And I want to continue doing a lot of the things that I do. I very much enjoy the things that I do. If I were to quote unquote retire, to do that, I'd have to, in some fashion or form, sell my business, which is not the easiest business to sell for whatever reason. But I would never totally move away from Sullivan County and Monticello. I would, you know, I love most of the year in Sullivan County weather-wise. The only times that kind of get to me are the January and February where you got a foot of snow on the ground and it's maybe -5 one night and the next night a -10. So maybe I'd rather be somewhere else for a month or two in the wintertime. But other than that, there's no way I'm moving away from here. Here's my friends. Here's my life, really.
Well, we're
So,
glad to hear that. Thank you so much for this, Les. This was great, and you certainly have been an asset for our community, and we appreciate it.
my pleasure. Happy to help. I'll continue.